For far too long, women's health has been narrowly equated with maternal and child health. But we know that health is never gender neutral. A transformative model must recognize intersectionality, how caste, class, location, and gender combine to impact access, care, and outcomes.
I would be inviting our moderator, Malika Tharakan from KHPT. They bring expertise in public health program design and intersectional approaches. I ask you to come to stage and introduce the panel and the panelists for us.
Public health for the longest time has always aspired to be inclusive. It has always aspired to be equitable, but I think tokenistic approaches to gender inclusion still is very, very common. Um, Gender as a construct, is widely spoken about, is theorized. There are frameworks that talks about it from a public health space, but when we what does it really mean to have gender transformative public health response? It is not understanding theoretical frameworks, but it actually involves getting our feet dirty. It involves being on the ground, unlearning, learning, failing, and really understanding what it means in different contexts. And we have an amazing set of speakers. My first question to you, Dr. Nirmala, you mentioned that you shared a really beautiful relationship with tribal populations and you saw them as your own and they saw you as their own. How did that happen? What brought this closeness?
If I'll need to go back to maybe like Malika said 40 years back. As doctors, we worked in Tata Steel. So it was a corporate setting. We, both of us, my husband and myself, we worked in Tata Steel. He joined as the first CSR person, can say. He was he joined at the time. It wasn't CSR anymore. It was like uh, Tata Steel Rural Development Society. So he was in the community, and I used to work in the hospitals. So we spent 10 years almost in rural setting, which is the mining area of Tata Steels. So it is a captive mining area, and all our work used to be around the hospital for myself. But because he was working in the community, he would come across many patients, and as you know, all these mining areas are within tribal population, largely. So they would come to the hospital and then seek me out. Where is Dr. Nirmala? We want for any, whether it's a fracture, whether it's a bare mold cases or any complicated cases. And that was a time when we noticed that all the severe complications would largely be tribal communities among them. And so that was kind of disturbing, as well as where do they go otherwise? If the Tata Steel wasn't there or the hospital wasn't there, we would be otherwise have been there, because there were no hospitals there. Government system was almost dysfunctional, and so that was the kind of beginning, I can say. Subsequently, we left Tata Steel. We moved out of Jharkhand. We went to spent some time in Hyderabad, and then in Delhi for 3 years. Uh, and then we set up an organization, because there was a lot of pull factor for us. We needed to go back and do something for the community that had given us so much in terms of learning about their situation, about their poor health conditions, and something definitely dragged us back home. And there were other reasons, of course, but this was primarily one of the reasons that we wanted to go back home. When we moved there, it was almost a span of 15 years since we had moved out of our hometown. So we did not know those people around the place that we ultimately settled in. So we said, let us do something for the community that we are going to serve. But we didn't know anything. That was a time when we were constructing our house. Moving out of Delhi, we constructed our house, and a lot of patients started coming in, because there was a rumor spread that nursing home is coming up in the village. So nursing home means, people are very anxious to come and visit, and that is how a lot of patients started coming in. And we had to actually convert our garage space into a clinic. We were forced to do it. But simultaneously two things were happening: the construction as well as, patient, outdoor outpatient, because there was no clinic as such. Uh, so that was a time we learned a lot about the communities there, the actual situations, the health situations, dire situations actually. People, like I was being called for to conduct deliveries in the community. I've conducted several deliveries, home deliveries in the mm, community, and the place normally would be a cowshed or a goat where the goats are kept or the chickens are kept. And while I'm conducting deliveries, chickens are just moving around and all. And I was wondering, what is this happening actually? It's going from a corporate setup like Tata Steel, and actually having to look at this situation in the community was a little depressing, and something needed to be done is something we thought. Um, so a lot of learning in terms of what people thought about their lives or their health. So predeterminism. Oh, this had to happen. ये तो होना ही था. So just giving it up, leaving everything to fate, and that was a kind of thought process. For us, it was then. Wasn't. I mean, like we didn't feel comfortable with that thought. So we said, let us do something. And fortunately, at that time, University College London approached us, asking us if we would be interested in doing some research. And that was also the time when a paper from Makwanpur, Nepal had come out, where women's groups had come together and they brought down the newborn mortality by 30%. So we said, this, we just jumped at the idea because we were not, and we were not, we did not funded or anything. So the first 6 months, we just hoping that some money would come in. We started doing the pilot, spent almost half our savings, and then we said, let us start the pilot just to understand what people actually think. And it was a proper pilot that we had done in 3 villages, just to see how women would react to talking about newborn deaths or stillbirths, because people are not willing to talk about it. So people were not willing to talk about death at all. They were just, it's not part of normal discourse. So that is how we said, we need to do something that can attract them. And that is how the method of participatory learning and action came about. And I'll talk to you about it a little later. But this is how we actually began. And that connect with the tribal population remains with us even now. Some of our first few staff are tribal people, they're still with us. So that is a kind of connect we have with the tribal populations in Jharkhand and Orissa. Right?
I think it really starts by understanding the place, by understanding the people, and by embedding ourselves in their lives and vice versa. So thanks for that. My next question is to you, Monsa. You've had a phenomenal journey with the sex workers. I want to really focus on that. I know that the journey started long back in 2003, and I'm certain that the lessons that you learned from the sex worker journey influenced the way you thought about gender and equity in the context of health. What would you like to share from that journey?
So my own journey, if I brief bit of it, it is something about the gender and in the education, in the decentralization, working with the women and child department. It is not something new for me at that point of a time. But really, my confusion got started when I got into the health sector. That was in the year 2003. Uh, it was such a confusion that I started thinking that did I come to a right place? Because I have to work with around 1 lakh sex workers, most marginalized, vulnerable community, which I had never seen before. Because we are talking about very superficially at the working with the women, gender, adolescent girls. Okay, all blah blah fine, but when this thing came to me the first time in the state like Karnataka, where I moved from Mysore to Bangalore, and then somebody took me that Mohan, you have to meet sex workers. So then I went to northern Karnataka, that is typically in the Devdasi belt, and started interacting with them. It was a 3-day workshop. I am not doing anything. I am just as an observer went. The people who working with me, after 3 days, they came back and told me, "Sir, I am not finding around 20 plates, glasses, pillow, bedsheet, cover. Where is that? No, everything is missing. That our women took away all those material. That is in a missionary institute. We are conducting that workshop. I suddenly realized, what is this? This sex workers, they come, they stayed for 3 days, and they took all the material with them. So I didn't have any way to get into that because I'm not experienced even talking to them. So then I realized, I got hold of my old friend, because I am also one of the Badal Sarkar trainee in 1987. So that taught me a lot. So I had my friend who is an artist. I called him. See, this is the issue. I want to go and meet the sex workers. So I planned a visit in 4 regions of Karnataka, in the Devdasi belt, in Hyderabad, Karnataka region, and the Bangalore, and also one in Mysore. 2020 like sex workers. We didn't do anything. And my artist fellow, he told, no, color and all don't work. I'll bring the big box light. So he brought some multiple color. And half a day we spent only how to mix color with sex workers. They are thinking, what is this mad people? 2 people have come and doing something with us. And we had only 5 questions. What you like? What you hate? What you want to be? And who are really your enemies? Like that, we had some 5-6 questions we went into. So they got the color in that. Maybe in the lifetime, first time they are having the color. They started drawing. The drawing went on even after closing 7 o'clock of our meeting. It went on up to 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. So they keep on writing. Then when I came back, I had around 700 drawings from the sex workers. And that is the first time I told McKinsey people, because that project is funded by Gates, and their mandate to give only condom and treatment for STI. And that analysis of that illustration showed me health is the 6th priority. Okay. So that was a shocking for me. And I came back and started arguing my own superior, whatever we call our senior people, and telling nothing doing. See, the women want this, and you are giving this. Okay. There is no logic. Then how to move about? So then we took, what is the first priority? Is their children. The second priority is the violence which they are facing from TUG, their partners, and police. These 3 came in. So I thought, okay, now the issue is much more serious than your HIV. Right? Then I think I should address that. That is how the entire, I'll tell you, it was quite difficult at that point of time, because McKinsey were the people who are actually coming and guiding us from the Gates Foundation. And to fight with McKinsey, they are coming out with all the, okay, this the women, how many condom you give, okay, how treatment happen, everything, evidence they are calculating. But I am talking about, no, how the police, how the women are shifting from Harrier to Davangere. It is 20 kilometer. Here police raid happens. This women goes to another place. You people put it in a newspaper in a big way that, okay, we are completely cleaned up the city. But women are not. Women are moving because another police only gives the information. See, tomorrow they will be right. You move that. So we started understanding all this. How? Then I'll tell you that our program design is completely changed. I think that is the biggest learning in my journey, what I did. So we trained the police, around 20,000 police personnel on part of it. We tried to understand with the London School of Health and Tropical Medicine. They came in for a small research study, how intimate partner violence is happening. I think we are crazy people at that point of time. We went to Kamatipur, Bhiwandi and Budwarpet in Pune and met 30 sex workers there, most of them from Bagalkot, Bijapur, and started talking to them. And you know how we went? We asked the women, right? No, one thing is very clear, sir, we don't trust anybody. We had lot in our life. So that's why your bedsheet, glass and all what? You are again somebody who is going to cheat us. So as much as I can benefit, I'll take away. That is the logic which is true also. Okay, because this is how their entire life journey is happening. So we went there. We came back. And there we saw that how the trafficking is happening. Okay, and we saw the small girls. It is no trafficking that what we talk about trafficking that in the film stories and all. It is very simple that the mother will take 50, 60,000 rupees from his uncle, only a person who traffics that girl for a domestic work. And after 2, 3 years domestic work, how she will get into. See, this kind of traffic is happening in a very settled way. So many girls are there. So that is the link. And they are also highly attractive and all. I can't tell no for them. That was the situation for us also. Because it is end of the day, it is their livelihood and this is their earning, right? I have seen the coastal place, each family, one person is there in the outside the country, in the Saudi Arabia or Gulf countries. And for these girls and women, it is Mumbai, Goa, it is the Gulf country because they have to earn, right? So, and who are the women? The majority of the women are from the lowest caste, and also the lot of minority women. So that became a challenge. See, I'll tell you, 2 programs are evolved. Then we didn't get into, I didn't speak about after that condom and STI. I spoke only about the empowerment. We designed a program on the violence and we had a collectivization process, trained around 18,000 women, and who are not, nobody was lifting a hand that I am a sex worker, but with the lot of trust and confidence, they started openly declaring that, yes, I also do that. And they built the CBO. And luckily, even today, last week, I recommended one CBO to Azim Premji Foundation that they are receiving the grant. And 4 CBOs got FCRA, and also they have cooperative society of their own. And 80% of the Government of India program related to HIV program implemented by them. What is interestingly I am able to see with that journey is, because of that, the reduction of the violence, that is a direct page with the health outcome. That is again with the reduction in the STI, sexually transmitted infection. The police training and the intimated part, we started a call center called for them. If there is any arrest, there is anything happen, that women only manage, right? See, all this support system is impacted on the health outcomes. Okay, we collected the data where women are part of the collective and non-collective sex workers. There is a big difference in the outcome. See, this we are able to influence the World Bank, which a World Bank was giving money to Government of India, and many of the countries on the HIV/AIDS need to add the gender component as part of the program. Till then, the project was very much into condom and STI. And today, I think all the CBOs are independent, and we started our second journey with the children of sex workers. I'll talk to you later on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. Zoya ma'am, I was just imagining what I should be asking you, really, because you manage 2 of the largest programs for adolescents in this country. Really massive, large-scale programs, yeah? And it covers the entire country. Can you imagine that? And I was just imagining, in your position, how would you think of really bringing in gender into such mass programs, into such scaled programs that are covering numbers that I think some countries cannot even imagine? They pride themselves in doing RCTs covering small sample sizes and keep talking about publication, but the scale at which I think the Indian government does programs is phenomenal. Something like gender inclusion, something like bringing that gender focus into scale initiatives. What has been your experience? What has been your challenge?
Just to say that if you're looking after the programs of adolescent and young people and school going children and adolescents, gender is a very essential, it's a very one of the very core issues which we address anyways. So right from what you mentioned, two programs. One is the RKSK, the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, within which we have what we call the adolescent friendly health centers are there. We have supplementation of IFA, we have distribution of sanitary napkins, and we also have the peer education program. So within all these, gender is an important part. In fact, gender is that important that it's one of the main thematic areas. Of we have got 6 thematic areas on which we are looking at how do you uh, inform, empower every young person who reaches out to a health facility, to a school within our own systems. And within that, gender is a part. And that's what I think what we are also growing within the government, which you mentioned. And why it is actually growing is because I would say it's because we have lot of feedback. So many young people here I know are there. And whenever we do have any kind of supportive supervisions, we have any reviews, we do have a lot of youth groups also. And we always ask them what is it that you want included in these programs, because that is the beauty of adolescent program is that it has started changing. I'm not saying we're changing huge by leaps and bounds. You do realize bringing about a change in any system takes time, but the sheer fact that we have included gender, violence, safety, what are safe spaces, how do you talk about safe touch and unsafe touch, who do you reach out for help, who are your help, who are your safety net, whether you are in schools or whether you're in the community, all that has been woven into the health programs what we are implementing for our school children, whether you're in school in fact or out of school. So both these components are there. I think that is the beauty of government. I would say one way is that you can, whatever decisions are made, whatever interactions we have with experts, national as well as internationals, we have the I think access to the best of global practices. So we try and always incorporate on what we are doing in our own systems. And that translates into how the program is implemented. It is a big challenge. I do realize because once you start training our own healthcare providers, they often it is our own healthcare providers who are one of the largest stumbling blocks which we face, because they come with a huge knowledge that I know everything, whether it is a medical officer or an A&M, to tell them what is gender. As a construct, it's not just male, female. It's very difficult because all the lives they have studied medicine in a very clinical way. They know male, female, likha, it's a treatment diya. It is for them to realize that it is a social construct, it's how you believe yourself to be, and that is how they want to be addressed, that is how they want to get the services for. It is difficult. And we've been trying for the last almost post COVID, almost last 3 years. We have updated all our training materials for medical officers, for counselors, and also we have added for the teachers to bring in the sensitivity so that whenever any adolescent, any young person reaches out for help, at least they feel safe. So whatever space in the health facilities there, that should be safe, confidential, non-judgmental. That is something which we are stressing on again and again. And we have got a lot of pushback from our own health I would say societies or faculties who keep saying, no, don't talk about these things. Let's just talk about very broadly STI, RTI, anemia, NCD prevention, obesity. That's it. But there's so much more to young and adolescent people that you can't just stay there. It's so cross sectional. One thing will affect the other. So if we don't talk about adolescent young people in entirety, we are doing such a big disservice. And that is why I think, as a person, I keep insisting that we have to build capacities our own healthcare providers. That is the first step. And once we have done that, 1 round, 2 rounds, we always stress that the states should go ahead and do a refreshers, because one time learning is not enough. And the refreshers, we always have case studies, and these case studies are always based on experiences. And this is experience which we do regional youth workshops and consultation in which we learn and hear from the young people, and from there we try and put case studies. Similar thing we did in schools also, in the school health and wellness program. The teachers came back to us and they said, okay, this is a case, this is something which we had, especially say related to gender issues in school. So then this is the kind of bullying which they saw in school. So we changed the names and we made it into a story, and then there was a question which was put in class. So what we have tried to do is to make the young people think. We're not saying this is right, this is wrong immediately, because it doesn't really ring any bells, because I think no adolescent or young person wants to be told ye sahi hai, galat hai. They want to think. And that is what critical thinking for us is really important for all the young people out here in schools, colleges, that you have to start thinking Start questioning. And only when you do that will you start reading yourself. You start empowering yourself and informing yourself. And that is what we're looking for as a positive change. So it is a big challenge, but yes, we're reaching there.
Amazing, wonderful. That's really encouraging. I must say, having worked with, working so closely with government systems, it's music to our ears to really hear this kind of an approach. So thank you so much, ma'am. I'm coming back to Dr. Nirmala. You got started on it. You wanted to talk about the PLA approach, and I read a little bit about it, and it's amazing to see the astounding success that the participatory learning action model, so to say, and the study that you guys conducted as part of that approach uh, gave you so many rich learnings from the field, and the fact that women were central to even conceptualizing what PLA would mean and how it would actually run or roll out in such diverse contexts. They were so central to it. That is, I think, very inspiring. We'd love to hear more about that journey.
Um, participatory learning and action is a model that we have developed. It's not we alone that have developed it. It was there, already there, but we adapted to the new, adapted it in a way which is more contextual for us. It actually goes through, it typically goes through 4 phases where community identifies their problems first, then they find solutions for themselves. So they are feasible solutions that they themselves can do within their community or within their groups. And the third phase is about implementing the strategies, and the fourth phase is about evaluating what went well, where they need to improve, and things like that. So typically, that is a 4 phased, but each phase has several meetings, and these meetings are designed in a way that that is more community driven. So there is a facilitator who facilitates the entire process. And the first trial that we had done, it was an RCT where women were able to bring down newborn mortality by almost 45% in 2 years' time, which was actually published in the Lancet, and it got hyped a lot. Subsequently, we thought if women can sit together and talk about newborn deaths, why can't they also talk about nutrition? Why can't they also talk about gender based violence? So then we moved to other areas of interest, and we asked the community. The last meeting of each of these meetings were about what would you like to talk about in future, and we collated all the information, or all the information from different groups. The first trial was about 244 groups, so 200 into maybe 20 per group. So many, that much of information we had, and accordingly we started the next program on nutrition. And nutrition also actually worked out quite well with them, because they like wasting, stunting, and underweight all came down in the community. Then we also thought about, like I said, gender-based violence. Why not gender-based violence? This was a very small project, but people did not know that what was violence at all. What is a psychological violence? They did not know. Except for physical violence, nothing else was even registered to them as violence. At the end of just 1.5 years, they were able to identify, yeah, what if I put less sugar in, or less salt in my food, that is also, and my husband beats me up, that is violence. So that is the kind of transformation that actually happened over just a very short period of time. And we also actually, just to add to what Mohanji said, we also had a session with the police officers in Ranchi. We could not continue because the project had to come to an end. But how to engage with when a woman comes into the police station. Only that much. Any woman, any woman coming into the police station, how do you react? So they actually put up plays, street plays. They wore, they asked for, chunnis from us, and they dressed up like that, and we gave them a skit, and they said, "Aap abhi banao," and they actually performed. And at the end of that, the whole day session, they were quite, you can say, transformed. And we should be more concerned about whoever comes into the police station. And then, of course, women police is there, but as men, how do they interact with women is something that that was done. And we also right now, we are looking at mental health as an issue, and PLA is addressing mental health issues among all age groups, especially adolescent health. And so we're looking at common mental disorders among adolescents. And PLA is the process that we are using. So adolescents come together, they sit together every month, and they go through a process of learning and unlearning. A lot of unlearning needs to happen, like he said. So that is the age group that and the most worrying thing for me was last week I was sitting with reviewing some of the work that was happening, and each of these facilitators, they said कि हमारे गांव में अभी लड़कियां 12 साल में प्रेग्नेंट हो जा रही हैं. 12-year-olds are getting. I'm seeing one girl who is 14 months, 9 months pregnant. She's just 14 years old. So this is the kind of situation that is happening. I'm not sure what is the trigger, whether it is mobile, screen time use, or something else that is happening. Girls are dropping out of school, and unless we are doing something, not specifically talking about that particular issue, we're not talking about addictions or anything. We're talking about a wholesome development of a girl child or boys or adolescent in general. And that is the way we're looking at that community of adolescents. So every meeting is designed differently. So it has to be very attractive for the kids to come in. So there's a game, some activity to get the adolescents together, and then you start talking about the actual subject. So and it has actually worked out quite well, and each of the studies has shown positive results, which is, I think, for the last 20 years we've been doing that, and PLA has worked out. Right now there are 9 state governments who have taken it up. So and that is for maternal, newborn, child health and nutrition. And we are hoping that some states will take up more difficult subjects or complex issues like mental health and NCDs. And so we right now trying out something on NCDs also.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think the experience of actually building what you want to build, that is based on traditional knowledge systems, what people already know, and then seeing how that actually becomes a segue to mobilize, to collectivize, and have deeper conversations that then, of course, leads to community owned actions, I think is probably one of the things that worked very well in a PLA sort of an approach. That makes a good segue into what I want to ask you, Mr. Mohan. That is, I think we speak about things that have worked, but I also want you to reflect a little bit about the kind of barriers that you've seen, in the development sector or in the education sector, when it really comes to health equity or gender equity, and particularly working with grassroots governance structures, the kind of things that you've seen that have disillusioned you, and how you've been able to, as an organization, we've been able to navigate through those barriers, would be very useful for the audience.
It's a tough question, but I am very confident because you also talked a bit about it. Who is the barrier in the development sector? In my opinion, we are. It is not the community. I think that is my precise experience from last 3.5 decades. I'm very sorry to say, many people may not like. I worked with around more than 1 lakh teachers. I worked in the literacy program massively. And later I worked with the women and child self-help groups, Panchayat Raj member, when this women reservation pitched in. Later in the health sector. My all learning, I'll tell you, wherever I went outside the system, I have seen more success at the community level. But it is very hard. I'll tell you why. Today, I see our adolescent girls organizing a program called Menstrual Day in the most backward district. Calling Panchayat member, calling everybody, they organize it. but our school don't organize this. The panchayats after COVID, very simple equipment on what is that? For COVID, we used to use oximeter. There is a big debate going on. Everybody is discussing whether we should give it to the panchayats or the families. And finally, they took a decision not to give because they don't know how to use. I'll tell you, we developed a kit under Grama Arogya program, and we gave that kit to panchayat with the 12 point of care device. We brought Asha and the ANM to the panchayat. They will mobilize and they will do the testing and link it to public health system. I'll tell you, women participation is increased tremendously. I'll tell you, within a 1 month, we are not we, actually Manrega department, we had 20 lakh job card holder, 10 lakh active people who are coming for a work. In that, 90% are women. All women got screened on the nutrition, diabetic, hypertension, blah, 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 all those, including the mental health component, everything. Okay, now what it tells me that whenever we go with the health to do something community, they are the first blockade. Tell, no, that is very technical. You don't understand. Okay. Same thing, I think, breakthrough everybody was experienced. When we develop a textbook, I was part of the textbook development committee for 3 years. I know that where the blockade is coming. Okay, in the education itself, who develops the textbook? What school of thought background they come in? What actually gets into the See, now these kind of issues, I will tell you, these are the barriers. How to address those barriers? So this is something my recent experience working with the panchayat. I'll tell you, one of the biggest revolution, if something happened in this country, which I strongly take up, is the 73rd and the 74th amendment of the constitution. Our parliament never gave even today, reservation for women. Our legislative assembly not given, but at least panchayat, they are there. But we know that who manages. Okay? But what is our approach? What is our governance, which we need to strengthen? Today, Zoya Madam talked about the adolescent. I'll tell you, my agenda is to bring the future leader, women leader, who can occupy that 50% of the position at the panchayat level. So that is the need of the hour. So we all know that. See, did lot of studies with the panchayat. You go and ask the men member, he talks about the welfare. Sir, ye hona chahiye, ye bus stand hona chahiye, charandi, blah, blah, all that welfare measure. You go and ask a women panchayat member, she talks about care. We have to shift the narrative from welfare to care. That can happen only if the grassroots governance can take up these issues in their hand. We know that next 10-15 years, palliative care is going to be the major issue across the country. I am already thinking in Karnataka, we are doing a small pilot with the palliative care, with the panchayat members, how to bring panchayat health together to address the palliative care, which is done in one of the states very well. So I see that panchayat can do this because they are the people who can support the health department to deliver the thing. Bringing the adolescent girl as part of the panchayat system to strengthen the subcommittees of the panchayat. So there is a different ways we are trying to strengthen the local democracy. I think the mindset of the people taking this to at the lowest level of the governance is need to be changed. That's why the whole I see that anyway, we work a lot of barriers on the community level, at the family level, all those things. Beyond that, I want to stress upon this because this is as a development worker in this space. I think we need to address a lot of issues which happened at our level. And I think that is what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are the barriers. Please go back, reflect, Yeah, redefined. Yeah, but I agree. I think there's a lot of unlearning we have to do and how we don't sort of put ourselves in those boxes. I'm going to just, I know I can, we definitely want to make a little time for a couple of questions at least. I'm going to address the last question to you, ma'am, which is a very candid question. Yeah, you don a lot of hats. You're a government official, very senior government official. You are a woman leader. You are a medical doctor. I just want to ask you, which is the role that you hold most dear and why? And with that, we'll close this and open it out to the audience.
No wonder you kept it for the end. You takes me into this question. God, I would say all three of them are so linked. I cannot be one without the other. I could not have been in government service had I not been a doctor. And what is it? And I maybe would not have chosen to be a doctor had I not been a woman. I really don't know. But one thing which I really enjoy is being a mother. I have got two wonderful daughters, and I would just like to say that they are the ones who keep me grounded, and they are the ones who, a lot of course, young people, and that is how I think a person will grow, not just by children. I would say if you keep interacting with young people, with adolescents in a positive manner, and always feel that you're not judging them, because a lot of times as parents, as elders, as policymakers, we are judging everybody. We are judging even when we are having interactions, we're judging the young people. No, why did that girl talk about contraception? Oh, is she sexually active? Why is this chap talking about this? It's always judging, and that's what our healthcare workers do. So that is something which we have to remove, that you cannot judge. Let us just take things at face value and give the right information. That is something which we keep stressing upon, is the correct information. The choice should be with the young person, that also to do whatever he, she, they want. That is fine, but they should be informed. And that is what you talked about, 14-year-old girl being pregnant. She may not have wanted to be pregnant, but she had no idea because she was not informed. And that is the whole system failing a young girl for that. She was not told about how to have safe sex, because the curiosity of having sex is very prevalent in adolescents. They want to keep trying. The curiosity is there, but then how to keep yourself safe, not just pregnancy, but STI, RTI, both of them are STI and HIV. So safety information is something where we have to make it a part and parcel of our own education. And just quickly sharing a small thing, I work a lot with education, of course, in the school sector. So whenever there was this huge training of school principals in which we were talking about growing up issues, sex, contraception, and they were so horrified. And they said, we can't talk like this in our schools. You're so comfortable talking about this. I said, I'm not telling you that you go back and start talking about sex in school. But as a principal, and these were all private school, very posh schools, not a sarkari one, जो बेचारे वैसे मुंह नहीं खोलते. Although that biology की reproductive chapter is never even opened. वो बंद ही रहता है. कह दिया जाता है कि please read at home. And if you have any questions, you ask. And who can ask? Nobody asks. So that chapter is never open. And that is a tragedy for us. But these young people grow up, they pass the 11th, 12th, they go into college, and they have no idea. They have no idea what the normal human system is like, how it operates, how you can control, and how you can keep yourself safe. And this is why a lot of disadvantage, I would say girls, boys, both growing up, most all genders are a disadvantage, because they many times do not realize when any abuse is happening also, because they've never been told that this is an area nobody should touch. This is how you should say no. And this is importance of consent. So all those things have to be woven into our own education. And that is what I told the principals, that it has to begin in schools. Okay, don't begin with sex education. You begin with growing up. Tell them, I would say in all school educations, the parents should be informed. So you must inform the parents that, okay, we are going to talk about growing up issues, which will relate to menstruation, growing up, nocturnal emission, whatever. You can put those in the books, and then you take consent, because a lot of our Indian parents are very touchy about where the children should know. And I guarantee you, a lot of parents themselves feel so embarrassed talking about it. So they say, okay, bhaiya, school hi bata de, acha hai. I don't want to tell my daughter or son about it. So I said, you have this golden opportunity of telling these children yourself. And if you don't do it, this is a huge time loss. And these are principals who are teaching from class 1 to 12. I said, do it as a graded curriculum. Do it, okay, fine. What are the good body parts? You start with class 1. Let's talk about that. What is the area which nobody should touch? That basic information should be there for, to say, till class 3, 4. Then you start talking about menstruation. Then you start talking about keeping yourself safe. What are the organs in a body? That things can be taught sensitively. And that is where I think as a system, as a culture, we have to grow and say, this is how you normalize talking about reproductive health. And that is a big challenge which we face again and again. But then there are a lot of community-based organizations which do a wonderful work. But a lot of times in government, our hands are tied. So yes, I love all my hats, I would say, and including being a mom.
Great. Lovely. On that note, we'll just quickly open up. I don't know. Do we have time for a couple of quick questions?
Just the question. Question is to Dr. Zoya. My question is, uh, even though we're doing, from the best intentions we have, from the scale that the government is trying, health and education department really collaborating on making this happen, who are we still leaving behind? I can see maybe children with disabilities, and like there must be like a bigger list. Who are we still leaving behind? And is there space when we have these dialogues to also mention that? Because unless we mention it, I think it'll never come to our conscious. It'll never come to our. Though we are succeeding, maybe like 90%, but who is this 10% who's still being left behind? Do we have curriculum which is, for an example, translated in Indian Sign Language? Just giving an example, who are we leaving behind?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I would say I just missed it, but yes, we are looking at disability in our programs. In fact, it is a part of our programs also. I did not mention because we are looking at out of school girls, tribal, vulnerable, and of course disability. In fact, in one of our trainings, we had a whole session on how to address, I would say, physical disability primarily in a adolescent friendly health clinic. In which how will you design a adolescent friendly center which is disabled friendly? But yes, to be fair, it was physical disability we talked about more and less about hearing disability. But I would say it's important for us to acknowledge that yes, the gaps do continue, and we do need to realize there are gaps as a government. And then on how do we need to plug those gaps is something which we will learn from you all only. And I'm happy to help, to reach out and help. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very good afternoon. I'm Monica. I work with Population Council Consulting. So, my question is around the system of PLA that we've been talking about. So, PLA is something that I have also deeply engaged with as part of the Swabhiman trial that was implemented in Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Orissa to improve nutrition outcomes of women and girls. And one of the things that we, and I personally started thinking was that we implemented through self help groups as a community systems. How do we scale it up across systems? Because still, I would say PLA is an intensive approach, ma'am, and we do require really having those conversations with people. And unless and until we do that, we will not achieve the transformative change that we're really intending towards. So, my fundamental question is to how do we integrate and scale it up through systems? That's where we'll be able to actually achieve the outcomes that we're trying to.
Great. Thank you so much. I think both
Yeah.
Mr. Mohan and Niz
So, let me
respond
talk
to them.
about PLA. I can say that EGIT has been involved in training the Ashas to do it in 7 states right now. So, it is already within the system. NHM has taken up this initiative, and we are just the training, we're just training the Ashas in different cadres. So we train the regional and at a regional level. So it's a form of TOT, and then they in turn go and train the ASHA facilitators. They are not ASHAs. We train the ASHA facilitators, and for example, each ASHA has a captive, a catchment area of say 20 ASHAs. ASHA facilitator 1:20 ratio. So ASHA facilitators are trained to do this. They go and do one meeting in a particular village, and the neighboring ASHAs come and attend the meeting. They go back and do the meetings in their own villages. So because the PLA is very easy to understand, I would not say it is very intensive because otherwise so many different governments and ASHAs would not be able to do it. This is just through one-off trainings, and we have the trainings are not very in depth. It is a residential training definitely, but off time also, they are asked to perform street plays or maybe make up stories that relate to their own community. And because ashas are also belonging to the same community, they are aware of the various practices, the beliefs in the community, and they're able to, we just train them to make stories. That is all. And context, everything comes from them. So that is how the entire PLA is actually happening. Right now, I think we are going into 3 other new states because NHM has requested us for scaling up PLA. So as of today, I think more than 150,000 villages are doing PLA. And this is being done with the Ashas. So it's
Maybe giving the right tools, yeah, and figuring out the modalities and the methods that can be very traditional also. Yeah, perhaps. Just the last question.
So what I want to talk about is in the first session, also in the education panel, also we talked about the teachers having the mindset, like addressing patriarchy, and if they have that inside them, then they will be able to make that change. Could we also expect that same thing in the health sector? Because while we are working with the systems level, also with the providers, where they can deal with the women who come to the facility, who have faced violence, and how they could be sensitive to deal with it. So a lot of emphasis has been on the skills of them, like how do they talk, but a lot needs to also work on the gender issue, like their own patriarchal mindset, with women, with men, with doctors, like at all level. So could there be some space for reflection in the facility level also from the government side, because NGOs keep pushing all the time, but unless the government pushes these things on these aspects, it is not going to go to scale. Thank you.
We found this is almost 10 years back, pre-COVID era. Okay. One Asha where we are working on the maternal and child health program is not paid her the incentive from almost 6 months. One male staff is harassing her, asking some favor, right? So that becomes slowly we taken that into at a different level. Then we started when we had a Fulbright scholarship student. We told you study with Ashas, understand what is really happening. Okay. So then we came to know it is not that one with one Asha, it's happening at a different level. Okay. It is not only because she is working, it is also at the domestic violence also is there. Okay. All this we are trying to understand. We came out with the concept. Government is another. I'll tell you, government, I know the strength and the limitation. But what we try to pitch in there, we brought out a concept called Three Sisters. We brought Asha, Anganawadi worker and A&M together. We didn't tell them that, okay, we told them that if you three of you work together, your work burden will reduce. Because Asha and Anganawadi worker, 50% duplicates. Okay, so then they are very interested. Yes, this is how we should do. We call it as it. What we have seen, the husbands and the family member got confidence. She is working with Anganwadi worker, another female, not with the male. Okay, we have to, socially we have to manage all this. Other side, she became a moral supporter for Asha to address other health workers in her department. No, she is not alone now. Okay, so we did that concept. Later, Government of India adapted called the AAA. See, when the scale up goes, quality also goes up. So some innovative way of, see, the end of the day, bringing some like-minded women together, strengthening her is very, very important. That is what we try to do. Like this, many solutions are there. To add for the previous question, no, I'll tell you because Dr. Zoya might have forgotten that. She only initiated on the vulnerability mapping, which KHPT did that in 6 states. So I'll tell you, we are implementing that in state of Karnataka, and we also use for the Northeast. In that, not really disability, but what we have seen that, see, whatever said and done, we are reaching the same people, right? The nook and corner, some girls are there who need some kind of special intervention. Who those girls? Which is those pockets? We did an exercise. I think Maitri is here. We did that exercise with the WHO support, and actually Zoya, Dr. Zoya was leading that from the Government of India. We have come out with a tool, and we are done that. In one district we are implemented NFHS 4 and NFHS 5, that particular district. That is the only district we have seen the reduction of 9% in the child marriage. Okay, because we didn't work in the entire district, we took the only pocket based on vulnerability index, right? So we need to see that those kind of an approaches, like PLA kind of an approach, different approaches need to be there, because those girls and I was talking to her. The biggest debate which is going on in assembly is that one girl, 9th standard student, delivered in Karnataka in the social welfare hostel. Everything is discussed now. It's a big issue because those kind of a teenage pregnancy now it's a biggest issue which need to be addressed. Luckily, what I asked my please triangulate the data, but the particular district where the child marriage is reduced because we have an intervention there. I have seen that because that's the most backward district. We didn't find big number of teenage pregnancy. Some satisfaction. Okay, something is working. Our intervention, no. So this kind of a model, I think we should exercise. Thank you. Hope I answered your.
Yes, and we are just on time. Yes, so thank you so much. I really, really hope that you are able to take back pieces of what we spoke about, pieces from this journey, think about it, and not fall into the trap of becoming predictable. And I think as a sector, we are often under pressure to sort of deliver, to follow frameworks, to fit ourselves into specific models that we see have worked in some contexts. But push the bar for yourselves, stop being predictable, go back to the ground, and health is a right. Health is a right. So I feel like this is, I hope that you'll be able to take back from these conversations. And thank you so much once again, Dr. Nirmala, Dr. Zoya, Mohan sir. Thank you. And thank you for being such a wonderful audience. And I'm hoping that some of you didn't doze off post lunch. Thank you once again. Thanks, Breakthrough, for giving us the opportunity. Thanks, Maitrey, once again, for working so closely on this. Thanks, everybody.